What is up? Welcome back to another edition of the PFF NFL podcast. I'm Mike Renner. Joining me, as usual, Sam Monson. And we're at that sort of lull between free agency and the NFL draft where there's no real news. The most news is either draft-centric, pro day-centric, that sort of stuff. The only real headline of the past week that has some sort of bearing on what we care about in the NFL this year is Adrian Peterson is visiting the Patriots. So, Sam, you're Adrian Peterson's biggest fan. Apparently, you've called him a 1 to 1.5 down running back at this point. Do you think this is a move that the Patriots should make, and does it make sense for them?
Yeah, the extra half a down is all the key there. He's not a 1 down back, he's a 1.5 down back, and that's important. The thing is, when people first mention this, it's an interesting move because it's one that does fit. You know, Adrian Peterson is not an every down back, but the league doesn't have too many of those anymore. You've got David Johnson, you've got Zeke Elliott, you've got Le'Veon Bell, and that's probably about it. Everyone else is getting by with this running back by committee kind of deal. And the Patriots have been doing that for years with this stable of backs. You know, last year you had Blunt, you had Dion Lewis, you had James White, and they would almost rotate, or they would work out what kind of game this is. You know, is this a LeGarrette Blunt game, or is this a James White kind of game? And that's how they would run their game plan. And Peterson can work in that 2 down, 1.5 down kind of role. And when you look schematically at how it fits, the Patriots are actually a really interesting match when you look at how they were using Blunt. You know, Peterson comes with all these schematic baggage, I guess, is the best way of saying it, where, you know, he doesn't run from the shotgun. He's a guy that's had just 5% of his career carries from the gun. But Blunt wasn't that much higher last year for the Patriots. He was up at 17.6%, which is significant, but not a huge amount of his carries coming from the gun, especially for a team that runs from the shotgun as much as the Patriots do, or plays from the shotgun, I guess. So from that point of view, they fit. The Vikings always ran this kind of gap scheme, man blocking type of system up front, and the Patriots don't run as much of that with Blunt, but it's certainly closer than a lot of teams. And in terms of the run concepts that they employ, it's actually a reasonably close match to how the Vikings are using Peterson. So if you plug him straight into that LeGarrette Blunt role that's already sitting there in the Patriots offense, it's actually a really close schematic match. The only thing that, you know, people brought up before when it first got mooted as an idea is that Peterson has this fumbling problem, and Bill Belichick hates fumbles with a fiery passion, and that was just inevitably going to lead to problems. But when you look over his career, it's actually not that dramatically different from the Patriots. Peterson has 39 career fumbles in terms of carries. The Patriots' backs over that time have 37. If you take out kind of receiving runs and that kind of thing and limit it to just the halfback carries, it goes down to 31. So Peterson definitely fumbles more than the Patriots have, but it's not a huge amount. And you've got a couple of years in there where he's had just 1 fumble. It's the kind of thing he has the ability to get control of and might not be a deal breaker. The real problem is whether you can square those finances, because Blunt has had that role for a pretty modest fee. Adrian Peterson's been earning like $15 million the last few seasons. So, you know, can you connect those two? That's a pretty disparate spread of finances to make join up.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about the scheme fit. Yeah, it makes sense from that point of view. But the finances would very much scare me with how he played a season ago. There's no real sugarcoating it, as LeBron James would say. He was awful a season ago. He was bad. He had 37 carries, 1.9 yards per attempt, 3 missed tackles on those 37 carries, which is a terrible rate. He did not look like his old self, which at 32 years old, I mean, he's never going to look like his old self at this point. You were basically banking on the fact that he hasn't hit that sort of cliff that we've seen aging running backs go over, that we've seen aging people at a variety of positions go over, where you just don't have those high-level traits anymore that made you win in your prime. And all of a sudden, someone like LaDainian Tomlinson, at the end of his career, was just not an NFL running back anymore, but was still out there getting NFL carries when he didn't really deserve it. So that would scare me a lot if I'm the Patriots, especially considering it's not like Adrian Peterson is going to go from double-digit millions of dollars a year to 1.5 million next year. It's still going to be in the 3 to 4 range at least, I would guess. If I'm the Patriots, I stick with LeGarrette Blount. He's going to come cheap. You know what you're getting with him. I know he is 30 himself, but he fits in their scheme. You know it works. I think you stay with the status quo because just that the risk with taking out Adrian Peterson would scare me too much at this point.
It's definitely a concern. I think there's a couple of things that I don't know if they work in his favor as much as they just mitigate the scare. The first being that Peterson has shown throughout his career that he's a little bit freaky when it comes to stuff that you shouldn't be able to do, but he is, come back off an ACL, look better than you did when you left, that kind of thing. The other thing is that last year was that offensive line, or certainly earlier in the year, was so bad that you almost have to throw out the whole season. I mean, you had 37 carries, gained 72 yards, 57 of which came after contact. So there was nothing going from that offensive line. It's almost hard to imagine him actually looking good behind that. And even if you assume that it was all him, 37 carries is basically 1 game's worth of action, 2 games for a guy like Peterson. So there just isn't much to go on. And I would almost be inclined to throw that out. And you look at the year before, and he may not have looked, MVP levels, but he was the league rushing champion. He broke 50 tackles. He gained 4.5 yards per attempt. So, that's a guy that looked completely legit, and that's only a season ago.
Yeah, I just think the risk reward with him isn't even 4.5 yards per carry isn't anything that gonna pay a guy $4 million is a lot for running back in the NFL right now. That puts him in the top half of the league, I believe, in terms of per year average. So I'm just not at the point where I would be willing to do that. So I'd look elsewhere if I'm the Patriots. That's all I'm saying. Let's move on to some preview of the draft here. We haven't really talked much about the draft because we have a draft podcast actually later in the week that me and Steve do. But we're going to look at each team's biggest needs heading into the draft and heading into next season. They might not even address them in the draft, but we have articles going up on the site right now for every team breaking down 3 biggest needs for them. Go ahead and check that out on our website. 3 biggest needs and players in the draft that fit those needs in early rounds and the late rounds. But right now, we're just going to break down the needs, why there's such a big need heading into next season. And we're going to do AFC this week and then NFC next week. So let's get it kicked off with the Super Bowl champion New England Patriots. What do you think, Sam, is the position they need to address most in this draft?
Edge rusher. And it has been for years. The Patriots have not been able to generate a consistent amount of formidable pressure from the edge. They've been cobbling together pressure. They're one of these teams that's very good at scheming pressure. If you look at how many total pressures Dante Hightower tends to generate from the blitz, from an inside linebacker position, they're having to get it from a variety of different places. You look at how they deploy Trey Flowers along that defensive line. He's moving around inside. He's coming from nose tackle. He's coming from all over the place. It's because they don't have a guy that you can just put out there on the edge and expect to beat a left tackle or even a right tackle one-on-one consistently. And it's been an issue for them. It's one that they're able to overcome consistently because they're good at coaching around it and scheming around it. But sooner or later, you need to find a guy that can do that because it makes things just a lot easier.
Yeah, true. They led the league last year in 3-man rushes, basically because they thought that fourth man, that fourth edge guy was better off dropping it into coverage than even rushing the passer because they didn't have anyone that was really effective at it. Chris Long, that was probably their most effective guy on the edge, but even he was around average grade for us. Trey Flowers, like you mentioned, isn't really an edge. He plays all over that front, but not really much outside of the tackle. So they bring 3 guys, and all of them kind of come from the inside usually because they don't have that sort of guy that they had when the Chandler Jones was around. So I definitely agree their edge is huge for them. Good class to be in need of it, but it might all be gone by the time they pick in the second round. So agree on the Patriots there. Let's move on. Miami Dolphins, what do you think is their single biggest need heading into this draft?
Yeah, the Dolphins, you go from the Patriots that don't have many needs, but one fairly glaring one, easy enough to choose, to the Dolphins that have several pretty big needs. The good news, I guess, is that, the good news in terms of identifying the need is that almost all of them come on the offensive line. So they need an offensive lineman. They need several offensive linemen, in fact, but one will do in terms of their biggest need. Mike Pouncey is a guy who definitely makes a difference to that team. You've got to question the injuries and his availability. Laramie Tunsil obviously is their top rookie from a year ago. He's probably going to get his chance at left tackle and see if he can hold down that spot. The rest of the positions are, at best, I think, upgradable. Juwan James, I think
guard has been a nightmare for them just for like 3 years now. Just utterly. That 1 year they had the worst two guards. I think it was 2 years ago. The worst two in the NFL grade wise. So they've known that, but still not addressed it.
Yeah, I think guard is their big issue up front. They need to find a couple of solid interior players at a minimum that they can expect to take over those positions going forward in the next couple of years.
I would love to see them add two guards, get two competent guards in there, and then all of a sudden you could have a sort of Dallas Cowboys-esque run game where Jay Ajayi behind a competent offensive line would be scary for most opposing defensive coordinators. My opinion, though, on what their biggest need is, and just one place I'd love to see them address in a big way is nose tackle in this upcoming draft. Jordan Phillips is just not an NFL nose tackle in terms of stopping the run. He's just too tall. He plays far too high to play against the run, gets crushed by double teams. Earl Mitchell was not the answer either. I would love to see them get just a stout first and second down nose tackle because they put their run defense in so many bad situations last year by not having that guy. We saw what a nose tackle could do for someone like the Giants last year in terms of transforming a run defense. Would love to see them add a nose tackle. I think that would be sort of the icing on the cake for this defense, even though, like you said, guard, also a very huge need for this team. All right, let's keep going through the AFC here. Buffalo Bills, what do you think, Sam? Biggest need?
The Bills are interesting because they've kind of got some of the plays. They've attempted to hit some of their weak spots in the last couple of drafts or in free agency, and they've been a bit unlucky in terms of injuries to Reggie Ragland and even Shaq Lawson at the start of last year. So we don't really know what they've got in those guys. And I think both of those are still positions of need until those guys show otherwise. So, they need another edge rusher. They need a linebacker. We just don't know if they have those guys in place yet. They've at least taken a shot at it, and we're going to have to see in 2017 if those guys have the chance to make that go away in terms of a loss or in terms of a hole. I think the secondary needs some attention, especially with losing Stephon Gilmore. I think that's a problem. You've got Ronald Darby, who should be a good corner still, even if he had a bit of a down second year. There's nobody there that you would be comfortable being the second starter and knowing he's going to be able to hold up. And I think safety is a bit of a problem as well, even with Micah Hyde coming on board to be a kind of a matchup weapon that you can move around the place.
I think you just named their whole defense, Sam.
Not the whole defense.
I think you just said defense.
Marcel Darius is good.
Besides nose. And I would go on the other side of the ball, though, personally. They have Sammy Watkins and then nothing, basically. You have Andre Holmes that you signed, who was never been, starter quality wide receiver. You have Brandon Tate also, but you really just do not have anything outside of a number one receiver. Teams are going to overplay Sammy Watkins like absolutely crazy if they don't find someone else. I would just love for them to find a wide receiver in this draft.
We had this
somewhere
conversation in PFF today that somebody is going to do something in this offense outside of Sammy Watkins purely because they almost have to. Who's it going to be? And I was saying that based on the one day of practice we saw last year on the training camp tour in Pittsburgh, I'm a huge fan of Walt Powell. Granted, I saw absolutely nothing from that point onwards to convince me that I was right and that I didn't just see the best day of his life in practice. But he has now become the new Jason Babin to me. I saw one game of Jason Babin as a rookie and he looked fantastic. And I waited like a decade for him to show that again. So Walt Powell is that guy for me. I'm going to wait year upon year, game after game until he shows that again.
You heard it here first, folks. Walt Powell, buy high in your fantasy drafts. I truthfully have no clue who he is, so good luck with that. All right, move on to the bottom feeder in the AFC East, the New York Jets. We could start listing the whole roster, but I think it starts and ends with the quarterback position with them.
Why would you think that? They've got Hackenberg.
Why would any sane person, I'd say, would think that based on what we saw from Bryce Petty last season, what everyone's seen from Christian Hackenberg's entire career, basically. My only thing is, do they even address it? Do they address quarterback in this draft, or do they act like they got it covered?
They can't, can they? It's such a horrible position to be in, because you either admit that what you did last year was a terrible, terrible mistake, which everybody else thought it was the moment you did it. Like, so it's not even as if you just went like, our bad, we made a mistake, and you bail on it a year in advance. You're doing it to prove everybody else right, which would be particularly painful to swallow. Or you actually you stick with the guy and you say, no, we're being stubborn, Hackenberg's the guy. And eventually you throw him in and you probably prove everybody right anyway, just in a much worse way.
Yeah, if they don't, I really do think that they may go through the whole draft without taking one. I mean, they might take one in the fourth round or something again, like Petty, but they might go through the first couple rounds without hitting quarterback, and that would be just the worst thing you could do if you're the Jets. But that's just my opinion. We'll move on to the AFC North, where the Pittsburgh Steelers were your champs last year. What position do they need to address, Sam?
Yeah, the Steelers have a lot of young guys on defense that actually started to play better down the stretch. I thought Artie Burns was a big reach in the first round, and he certainly struggled early on, but he kind of started to get it towards the end of the year. They still need an edge rusher as well, just like the Patriots, though for dramatically different reasons. They have been swinging and missing on edge rushers for years, and James Harrison is still by far their best edge rusher at the age of 38 or whatever he is. They've tried to replace the guy like 4 times, and he just keeps coming back, and they need to keep giving him the starting job back because they can't find anyone better. Like, at some point, They need to figure that out.
At some point, he has to. I mean, like, I'm not going to bet against them any single year, but there will be a year where James Harrison finally loses it and has to retire. But I won't bet against them this year, but it's still something that needs to be addressed. They didn't have a guy across from them. They're in a really good position to address it in this draft. But yeah, that's obviously, to me, the biggest need for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They could also use an inside linebacker, losing Lawrence Timmons, someone next to Ryan Shazier, but I think Vince Williams is all right in that role. Not like a huge pressing need like edge rusher is. So,
do you think?
And then on offense, really don't have any needs, I'd say.
Yeah. Do you think that Bud Dupree actually has it in him to realize his athletic potential? Because people started to be a little more impressed with him last year when he got a run of like 5 sacks in 4 games or 5 games.
I still don't think so. I think he has potential to be a pure bull rush guy. If you line him up outside and just tell him to bull rush every single time, don't do another move, he could collapse the pocket somewhat regularly. That's about all I could ever expect from him, because he just can't bend, do anything laterally. It's a nightmare for him asking him to do that. So he just freakish explosiveness in a straight line. That's about it. All right, on to the second place team in the AFC North a season ago, the Baltimore Ravens. Sam, what do you see from them?
Way to pour cold water over the Bud Dupree lovers. Let's kill that guy.
Are there still some out there?
Of course.
There are, but
former first round pick only a couple of years ago. There's still plenty of people out there that are expecting, the greatness that may never come. The Baltimore Ravens, this is another team that isn't in bad shape. I think, again, they could probably do with an edge rusher. Terrell Suggs he's not quite James Harrison in terms of getting up there and needing replacing, but at some point they're going to need his successor. And there aren't a huge amount of them kicking around on the roster that look readily able to do it. They probably
seem to find one in like the late rounds though, like every year. So I think they'll somehow, right?
They need to either get dramatically better play out of Rashad Perriman, or they need another receiver.
I think even if he does play great, they need another receiver.
Yeah, but it becomes a much bigger need if they don't get anything out of him. And then they need somebody to step up on that offensive line at right tackle to replace Ricky Wagner.
Oof, yeah, James Hurst, not the guy I really want playing right tackle for me in that offense. He could be not a liability, but he's been a liability up to this point.
He could be not a liability.
But he's been one. So
it's bad when your ceiling is could be not a liability.
Sure. Yeah. Tackle definitely a need. I think wide receiver probably a bigger need for them. Go back to when they actually won the Super Bowl, how much having a guy like Anquan Bolden meant to that offense. Have not been able to replace him since. So I definitely see wide receiver as the biggest need for them. And then moving on to the next team in the AFC North, the Cincinnati Bengals, I see wide receiver as the biggest need for them as well. Andy Dalton needs his wide receivers to win and win quickly. And we saw when they didn't have Eifert, when they didn't have Mohamed Sanu last year, when they didn't have Marvin Jones, just how much he struggled. I think wide receiver a huge need across from AJ Green.
Are you insane? Have you taken a look at what their offensive line looks like on paper right now, and you think that wide receiver is the biggest need?
They get the ball out quickly. They get the ball out quickly. I want, if they got another wide receiver, it would quell some concerns along that offensive line. I'll just say it. I think wide receiver is bigger.
Andy Dalton is going to have approximately 0.2
so here's the thing. They were
ball.
First and second. Cedric Boyhe, Jake Fisher were first and second round picks. It's one of those things where, yeah, it's a need, but are they going to address it or try to give these guys a chance? I don't think they ended up addressing it, is my thing. Like, realistically.
Like, they know. I mean, there's no way that they don't understand.
A lot of teams know, though, and just won't be willing to invest that sort of draft capital back into the same position that they've been investing in. I don't know.
I mean, you've got to take a shot. When you look at how that offensive line looks right now, I mean, if it's even close to what it's slated to be on paper, it's a Boyhe at left tackle, Bowling, okay, fine, at left guard, Russell Bodine at center, at best is okay. Then it's some combination of Andre Smith, Fisher at right tackle. It just, no. I mean, this is horrible.
Yeah, it's bad. I'm not debating that. I'm just saying wide receiver could give you year over year strides better than an offensive tackle would.
Not if your quarterback is dead.
They get the ball out quickly. Come on, Sam.
He's going to have like 0.2 seconds on average to throw the ball, and then he's toast. Just
run a screen every play.
Yeah, no,
they run a lot anyway.
They need offensive line help. Bad.
I agree. I mean, they're both needs. We'll agree on that. All right, Cleveland Browns, another team where you could start naming off the whole roster, but where do you see their biggest one?
Yeah, the Browns are hard because the entire team.
Line now. That offensive line's solid.
Yeah, no, but the entire team. The issue is that the entire team was like a rookie last year, so they're almost they're like the Bills writ large in terms of their problems are all young, so it's hard to work out which one you actually need to target. I would say they do need a cornerback. One of the few established veterans on this team that is supposed to be good is Joe Haden, and Joe Haden hasn't been good for a while now. So I think that they could do themselves a favor by getting rid of that contract if they can find a young corner that they know can start and get the job done.
And again, it's one of the positions where, like you said, it's a roster full of young players. They don't really have many young players, rookies. They didn't draft any from that position the season ago. So one where I would address as well.
Yeah, well, they kind of, I think they did draft one who didn't stick. Wasn't that their only rookie that didn't stick? Was it Trey Caldwell?
Oh.
I think one of the 14 draft picks that didn't stick. Brienne Buddy Calhoun, I think, is young as well. He was a free agent last year. So they've kind of got some young guys there. The problem is there's no one there that you would say has earned that starting job, and they need to get a replacement for Joe Haden. So, I think you've still got youth there, and you're going to see what sticks, but it's time to chuck a first round pick at it and find a legit starter. And
they do need edge rusher. That's why the Myles Garrett thing, no brainer to me. Basically, they don't have a guy right now besides Jamie Collins, probably their best edge rusher at the moment, and you don't want him really playing the edge. So I think that's the position I'd address, and they likely will when all is said and done. Onto the AFC.
Just with the Browns, if they're going to take Myles Garrett at 1, which I think everybody is assuming they're going to do, would you eschew quarterback at number 2 and go for something like a corner? Take maybe, you could potentially get, I don't know, if you're going to get the best one available, but you're going to get one of the top couple corners available at number 12.
In this class, I would definitely not draft a quarterback until the second round. I think there's just too much talent. I think, like you said, cornerback and edge, where premium positions that you just don't find often. If you're going to be drafting that highly, like the Browns are, go nab 2 guys who can be franchise cornerstones of your defense. I think you definitely go that route.
We're just going to go endlessly with this awkward silence?
Oh, okay. Moving on to the AFC South. Texas. Oh, maybe the connection dropped. No, it didn't. All right. AFC South. Houston Texans. Your champs last year of the best division in football. Who do you see them taking?
After they made the impact move of free agency and trading away their awesome quarterback. They need a quarterback because Tom Savage is your starting quarterback in Houston right now, and that wouldn't fill me with a huge amount.
You don't believe in Tom Savage?
I don't.
You're not
no. I'd like to. It would be a nice story.
You're in the minority on that one, I think. No. Yeah. I mean, this one's obvious. Again, just chalk it up. QB. If they don't get Tony Romo, it's basically not even quarterback in the draft, though. They got to go. They just have to go get Tony Romo, or else that trade was one of the worst trades I can remember. So, quarterback. Pretty obvious one there. Tennessee Titans. Here's one where I'm going to finally give a team a tie. I haven't done a tie yet in terms of biggest need, but I'm going to say that they need wide receiver and cornerback so badly that I'm going to give them a tie.
A wide receiver and the corner. I'm definitely with you on the wide receiver thing. I think they desperately need some wide receiver help. It looked weird starting the season when Tajay Sharp was our number one receiver, and we were trying to work out, especially after a decent preseason, and you were kind of looking, well, where did that come from? This is the guy that didn't grade tremendously well in college, and you're like, how do we miss him when we were doing the draft stuff, and he didn't look great on tape either. And then it turned out he wasn't actually that great.
Yeah, it was more happenstance. It was more the best of a bad bunch of wide receivers. Although Rishard Matthews is good, but Rishard Matthews is good if he's your second wide receiver. He's not good if he's your first wide receiver, I'd say.
I think they're in a bit of a better spot at corner with Logan Ryan coming on board in free agency.
I just don't trust Jason Forte.
No, he's definitely slipped and he's a problem. But they've got Mr. Irrelevant Kalin Reed there, who in year 2 is clearly going to take over that starting job and dominate, because that has to happen. Otherwise,
last year when I was at their training camp talking to John Robinson, Kalin Reed had a pick in practice.
There you go.
And we said, hey, you guys really liked him, right? He's like, yeah, we liked him so much that we took him as the last pick in the draft. So I don't think he really liked him, but he liked him more than anyone else, apparently, which is enough for us. Hopefully he gets a chance. But yeah, I'm not banking on Mr. Relevant being the answer, but you kind of seem to be banking on that.
Look, I'm all on board the long shots this week, so I'm going for Kalin Reed, I'm going for Walt Powell, I'm going small sample size, long shot, big payoff.
Well, we'll see how that plays out for you. All right, on to the Colts, where their biggest need is just a player who can play defense competently, I'd say.
Yeah, they need your nose tackle again.
Not really a position, just like knows
just defender.
What defense is. Yeah.
Yeah, they need your nose tackle again, because poor old David Parry just can't get it done. He was a guy I liked at Stanford a lot, but I liked him in a kind of, I'd be curious to see if this guy can play in the NFL way, and they've given him a shot, and it doesn't look like he can. He's just...
Start day one.
Yeah, he's just not strong enough. He's not big, not strong enough. Plus, he appears to be an idiot if, going joyriding in a golf cart is any indication. It's a particularly stupid thing to get yourself arrested for.
Sometimes nose tackle is a position that can take a few years, because holding up to double teams, that sort of thing, is not, you just don't see that sort of power in college. It's not nearly the same sort of skill set.
Yeah.
But from what we've seen from him, this doesn't look like it's going to happen.
So I agree with
nose tackle.
I just don't think he has the size to do it. You see nose tackles, you're like, okay, this guy has the size and strength to get this done once he gets the technique and once he learns how the strength is in the NFL. But you see a guy that's kind of barely tipping the scales at 300. He's undersized. He's getting by entirely on kind of motor and want to. And you're thinking there's no room for upside there.
Yeah. Ooh, don't say upside. All right. On to the Jaguars, where I hate to say it,
don't do it.
If I have one position that I would love to see them upgrade the most, it's quarterback. I mean, that just needs to happen. It's the quarterback position. That you can't have Blake Bortles doing what he did a season ago. That's just, you can't even have him being slightly better, because that's still going to be awful. You have to get competent quarterback play, and he wasn't even close to that last year.
But he was the season before. Can they get that back?
That's why it's like, I hate to say it, but going backwards, though, in year 3 just doesn't inspire confidence in me that he's going to all of a sudden recapture in year 4. I don't know.
No, that is scary. And you have to figure out why that fell apart and if you can fix it. But he was good the year before. Like, he was showing some stuff that you would be really excited by. They're another team that needs edge rushers. They've actually invested in them.
It's another team, though. Yeah, I was going to say they've invested so much on that D-line where it's another situation of, are they realistically going to draft a guy in the first or second rounds at that position with Yannick Ngakoue, with Dante Fowler? Just, I don't think so.
I think they could also really do with the tight end. This is a team that hasn't really had an impact tight end despite trying to get one in a guy like Julius Thomas, which worked out well enough that they traded him for basically nothing.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's another spot in a good tight end draft, I think, that they could really go after.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up taking one at some point. On to the last division in the AFC West, where the Chiefs were your champions last year, kind of backdoored it with the Oakland Raiders and Derek Carr getting injured at the end of the year. But what do you see as Kansas City's biggest need?
Yeah, the Chiefs are actually in a reasonable spot. It's another team that I think could do with some receiver help. Jerry Maclin is solid. Tyreek Hill is emerged as a weapon, but he's not going to be a number one receiver kind of guy. And Chris Conley, I just don't think is that great. So I think they could stand one addition at wide receiver to really turn that offense into something pretty scary. I think they could do it running back, having struggled to really replace Jamal Charles. I think there's still some space in that defense too.
Yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs are so weird because there's really no, I'd say wide receiver is probably their biggest glaring, like, oh yeah, we don't have a ton of talent here, but every other position is kind of like, we're fine. We're okay here for now. Yes, you could upgrade. Yes, you could get better at that position, but if there's no liability, I'll say, on this roster, I think that's why they, made the playoffs last year, is because of that. But again, I'd love to see them upgrade quarterback. I would love to see them take one in the first or second round of this year to try and develop, to get Andy Reid to get his hands on, because we know what Alex Smith is at this point. Yes, you can win Super Bowl with him. I said that in the article last year. You said no, you can't, but I said yes, you can.
And they didn't.
I think you, and they didn't. So I'm not sure that proves you right, but I'll say, I'll say you win this round. But I still would love to get someone in there to sort of develop, even if he's not going to be the guy this year. A couple years down the line, I just don't think you're going to realistically roll with Alex Smith for the next 5 years as your starting quarterback. I don't know. I'd start to address that right now if I were them.
Yeah, well, at this point, you're reaching the age where you should be looking for his replacement anyway. I mean, that he's 1 year behind the Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers group, who are all starting to talk about replacement. Guys they need to look at going forward to take the mantle. Alex Smith is the next year in that progression and isn't as good as any of those three. So definitely time to be looking for the future.
Agreed. All right, on to the Oakland Raiders, who another team with not a ton of holes, especially offensively. I'm not sure there's a position you could realistically upgrade outside of right tackle. Maybe running back. I went with, in this team, the linebacker position, though. I think looking at what they have right now, just a whole lot of nothing. I would love for them to get more than one even linebacker in this draft.
Yeah, I'm on board. I think linebacker is entirely the position, especially given that I don't know that you could be confident in Perry Riley doing the same thing as he did last year, purely because we've never seen it before. So maybe he just found himself in a really good scheme that fits everything he does, or maybe he just went on a run where he played particularly well for a while, and we're not going to see that again from him, at which point the Raiders desperately need linebackers.
Yeah, and he's also still a free agent, so no even certainty that he'll be back next year. So that could be a huge need if he's not. So on to the Broncos, who I could say quarterback for them. It probably is quarterback for them, but I'm not going to say quarterback. I'm going to say offensive tackle because we talked about it ad nauseum last year. Donald Stevenson, that can't happen again.
And yet it will if he has to start again.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It will.
No, that's terrible. They need to fix that. I mean, Donald Stevenson at tackle and Ty Sambrailo, if he had to play tackle, those two are bad enough that it will ruin your game plan just by having them in there. Like, it's not even as if, those are guys that will literally single-handedly derail
Worse than what the Bengals are looking at. And you were pretty adamant about the Bengals needing to tackle.
This is true. Yeah, logically, I can't go anywhere other than tackle for them.
Definitely tackle. I don't know. I guess I know how they let Russell Okung go because he signed for crazy money, but Russell Okung wasn't even that good, and he was still by far their best tackle last year. And now they have, like we said, nobody there. So huge need for them. If they don't go tackle round one, I would be terribly surprised. That's one of the teams where just it has to happen. You can't go into next season that way. So
the
Broncos
statistics are fun for them. Like if you look last year, I think Andrew Whitworth gave up 14 total pressures all season long. Whereas if you look at Donald Stevenson, surrendered 51. Ty Sambrailo surrendered 20, but in only 123 passing snaps. And Russell Okung, who they let walk out the door, gave up 57. So the three tackles that Denver rotated through any kind of degree coughed up 128 total pressures to Andrew Whitworth's 14.
Yikes. Yeah, pretty obvious there. The last team in the AFC, my sleeper pick this season. They're going to make some noise.
They're always
Los Angeles Chargers. No, I didn't say. I said they're going to be better than expected last year. Now they're legitimately sleeper team. Don't get twisted. Los Angeles Chargers. What do you see, Sam, as their biggest need? Not a lot. Not a lot in this roster. You're looking at it, right? Not a lot.
No, hang on. This is your Washington level caveat for this season. The Chargers are fine as long as they can fix the offensive line, which is a train wreck.
Yes, that's why I'm going to say guard for them. They need a guard. Maybe two. No, Barksdale's all right. Okung's all right. They're all right there.
Really?
Maybe.
Okung is.
I'd like to see them kick Slauson to guard and start Max Turk at center, but we'll see what they end up doing. They just what they need is a someone who can prevent injuries. That's what their biggest need. It's for a doctor who knows how to stop people from getting injured, because that just derailed their season last year.
Okung is, one, not tremendous on his best day, and two, going to a team that is
huge injury
staggeringly
risk.
Well, an injury risk team, given that they appear to be cursed, but also staggeringly unsuited to him in terms of schematics and what he does well and what the Chargers like to run. He is going to a team that I think
pass plays,
yeah. It's a team I think just doesn't do what he does well, and does a lot of what he doesn't do well, and that seems to me to be asking for a lot of bad plays.
We'll see. I have unreasonable hope at this point, but offensive line would be nice if they could get Forrest Lamp in the second round. I'd be ecstatic for them. That would be perfect. I think that would solve some of their issues. Let's move into some segments now. Sam, what has been grinding your gears this week?
So I've been watching a lot of cornerbacks for our draft prep stuff and our draft profiles, and this is an oldie. It's one that's bugged me for a while, but it's risen back to the top of my list. It's cornerbacks that celebrate when the ball lands incomplete, when they had absolutely nothing to do with it, and in particular ones where they were actually beat on the play. Like the guy got behind them and the receiver drops the ball and the cornerback starts like giving it the incomplete symbol or a finger wag or something, some form of celebration where you got hosed. Like that should have been a 60-yard touchdown, but you got lucky because the receiver has stone hands or the quarterback can't hit the broadside of a barn door. You have no right to celebrate. None. Can't do it.
Oh, I know this one grinds your gears because I've seen you mention it a lot before. You do not care for cornerbacks that enjoy celebrating. This one every weekend you're mentioning it. So yeah, I mean, I can get on board with it. I don't mind though. If you're going to celebrate in a guy's face, have it be after a play where you shouldn't be celebrating. Gets under the wide receiver's skin even more, I feel like. I don't mind it.
Yeah, you're just asking for trouble. That guy is going to come out and he's going to do you again for a giant touchdown later in the game. You got to make sure if you're celebrating, it's because you actually did something.
As a cornerback, you get so few opportunities to celebrate. Just go for it, dude.
You're a bad cornerback.
I'm not. Yeah, which there's a lot of them. But all right, let's move on to, let's keep it moving. Explain this with the draft coming up. We're going to talk about compensatory picks, what they actually are. Few people seem to sort of grasp how they work. It's basically, there's not a public formula for them, but there's a lot of stuff that is known about how they work. they are tied to certain players. So basically, in free agency, if you have lost more guys, if you have signed more guys in free agency than you've lost, you will not get any compensatory picks. No matter if you lose, Aaron Rodgers in free agency and Jordy Nelson and then sign 3 nobodies, the fact that you sign 3 nobodies, you will not get any compensatory picks. But when you do get a pick, it is tied to a certain player and a certain contract. So if you sign or if you lose someone who had a really high contract in the free agent market, like a Matt Khalil, that could get you a 3rd round pick depending on basically where he falls in all the contracts that got signed over the course of the offseason. So they sort of rank them. The contracts that got signed get ranked. And it starts at the end of the 3rd round, and every single round after that, there are compensatory picks: 4th round, 5th round, 6th round, 7th round. You get a pick depending on how big the contract is, the guy you lost. If you lose one and sign one, they kind of net against each other. The top contracts that you sign and lose net against each other. And if you have signed an equal amount of players to what you've lost, the best pick you can get is a 7th round pick. You can only get a 7th round pick. So that's basically the nuts and bolts of it. This year is the first year that compensatory picks can actually be traded. So in the past, you were locked in. If you had a 4th round pick that was, at the end there because you lost a guy, you were locked into that pick. Now you can deal it, do whatever you want with it. It's like any other pick. So that is how compensatory picks. Anything you'd like to add there, Sam?
Not really, other than it's a formula that isn't 100%.
Smart teams know how to use them. I'll say this. It's a big thing. It can net you a lot of picks if you know how to use them correctly.
Exactly.
That's why signing a nobody for, $1 million if you've lost some players in the offseason is just teams won't do it because you won't get picks at that point.
Yeah, it's a formula that isn't entirely out there in the open, but some teams have clearly gained it enough to be very, very good at picking up these extra picks. Season after season, you see a couple of teams are able to get themselves really good picks. I mean, when you think about it, a 3rd round draft pick, even if it's late in the round, is a pretty hefty price for essentially nothing, just gaming the system. Teams like the Patriots, the Ravens are consistently getting extra useful picks out of this.
2 things I actually missed. 1, if a player is cut by another team, he doesn't factor into that equation. So those don't even count in the formula. And 2, if you re-sign your own player, that also doesn't count in the formula. So retaining your own player, signing someone that was cut by another team has nothing to do with compensatory picks. So that's about it. Fun stuff, compensatory picks. Fun stuff. All right, on to historical power rankings. This week, we are going to do a fun one, like we've been doing all weeks. Most overrated players in the PFF era. That's the last 12 seasons now? 2006? Someone else do the math for me. Since 2006, the most overrated players in the PFF era. Sam, I want to hear your list first.
No, this has got to be your list first. I'm tired of giving mine. It worked well when you gave yours last time. We're going to go with yours.
My list first. Number 5. This one pains me to say it because at one point I don't think he was overrated, but the last few years the perception of him has been way off from what he's actually produced, and it's Clay Matthews. He's just not a good pass rusher anymore. He's not. That's all there is to say about that. And he's still on something like a $15 million a year contract where he's getting paid like one. And truthfully, he wasn't even that good of an inside linebacker. So there's not much. He's not bad by any means, but yeah, the only guy he really beat up a season ago was T.J. Clemmings, which
doesn't count.
Yeah, we've talked about enough. So Clay Matthews at number 5, he's gotten overrated to some degree. At number 4, I'll say David Harris, the linebacker for the New York Jets. Basically, the definition of rank average to slightly below average linebacker over the course of his career, which is fine. You can win with that. But when they were, one of the best defenses of all time back in 2009, he was pumped up like, hey, this is one of the best linebackers in the NFL, when really he never quite was. He's never been that guy. So I'm going to say David Harris, average linebacker, always treated as a well above average linebacker, not been that guy. Number 3, one we've talked about when we talked about Pro Bowl voting earlier towards the end of the regular season, Maurkice Pouncey. He's truthfully on a Hall of Fame trajectory when he's at no point really been a top 5 center in the NFL. Keeps getting that because of his name recognition, first-round pedigree, and the fact that just no one knows the names of other centers in the NFL, basically, and who's playing well. So Maurkice Pouncey been yearly overrated. Number 2, Joe Haden. We touched on it earlier. Basically made a name for himself by playing these sort of playing that man coverage where you just follow a number 1 receiver around the field with no real regard to whether he did it well or not, which there were years where he did it terribly. There were years where he did it all right, but he was never even close to the Revis level. He was never even close to the level of guys, the Patrick Peterson level of guys who legitimately can lock down number 1 receivers. And he sort of got that elite sort of tag on him just because of the fact that he followed number 1s, no regard to whether he was doing it well or not. So Joe Haden, very much overrated. Then number 1, a guy that I don't think anybody likes, and that's unless you're actually from Pittsburgh, and it's Joey Porter, the outside linebacker for the Steelers and for the Miami Dolphins back in the day. And he has number 1 on my list for 2 big reasons. One, he suppressed the careers of James Harrison and Cameron Wake when those guys should have been starting over him in both places. We missed out on so many good years from both because of Joey Porter taking their snaps and playing like just not a good outside linebacker. So that's my top 5.
I like it. I don't know if these are the most 5 overrated players, but they're 5 guys I think that I've pulled up because they're players that we've dramatically differed in terms of PFF grading to the kind of reputation those guys had cemented and seems impossible to shake. 1, Tony Romo. Even when Tony Romo was putting up ridiculous numbers, insane passer ratings, the grade was never quite that good. There were guys that were playing better than him. He didn't, I don't think, ever play to the level of the ridiculously nice statistics he put up for a couple of seasons. I don't know that Tony Romo was ever this great quarterback. And you've obviously got the injury risk stuff with him. Julius Peppers was a guy who feels like he should have been better than he has been all throughout his career. Here's the
thing: we missed some of his prime, though, which hurts us.
That's true, but I just from watching it, I suspect the same thing is true from the start of his career. He is a guy that has almost limitless physical tools. You see these games where he takes over, where he looks like a J.J. Watt level freak, and then he just disappears the next game. You don't see that guy again, and it just feels.
I will say this: Julius Peppers does not get a lot of flack for not playing the run when he really doesn't like to play the run a lot.
No.
Like, he could be dominant against the run. He kind of just plays patty cake a lot.
Matt Forte is a guy who, even at his best, I don't think was that great.
Ooh, I forgot about Forte. Yeah. He got so much love for just fantasy football.
Yeah.
It just was a purely one of the, I'd say, poster boys for fantasy not matching up with reality because he just got so much usage. He was just a usage hound.
Yeah, he really was. He was a guy that got just through sheer weight of carries and touches, got a huge amount of production, but I don't think it was ever actually that good. His best years came years ago, and he was still racking up carries and touches for the Bears way past that point. Marcel Darius for the Bills, I don't think has ever been even close to as good as his overall reputation. One of the
don't remember when Neil wrote an article saying that he was better than Ndamukong Suh?
I think Neil's a little bit crazy, though.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say that sort of backs up your point. So
old age has warped his mind. You can't really trust what he puts down. I think Darius at his best is very good, but he came out and was instantly regarded as like the best nose tackle in the game. I think it took him a couple of years to get to his best, and I don't think he ever really took an extra step into that realm. So I think Darius has been overrated for most of his time.
Fair enough.
That's me done. I had Pouncey as the other one as well. I think that's dead on.
Okay. Yeah, that's a given. I think both. I wouldn't disagree with it. The only guy I'd say I might disagree with on your list is Romo. I think I just don't think he's held in that highly regard in the general public. Everyone's kind of seen him sort of on that outskirts, never as an elite quarterback, kind of on the outskirts, the guy who doesn't win when in the playoffs, chokes down the stretch. So I think he gets sort of the reputation of not being great, but he does have, I will say, sort of grades not matching up with numbers. He's very much a guy who grades lower than his raw passer rating, that sort of stuff would say. So good list, a little different than, a little better than your normal schlock you put out there, but
nice,
good stuff. All right, that'll do it for us. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and make sure to go ahead and check out Draft Pass. I think 2.0 came out today. Is it 2.0, Sam, or was it 3.0? I don't know. We had a new update that came out. Which one?
No, I don't know. I was just gonna mock the fact that we've named that just to upset you.
Oh, I know. I've come full circle on it, though. I kind of like saying it, but 2.0, I'll call it. I have no clue which one it actually is, but it's up now. A lot of new stuff, over 200 player profiles on the site with the graphs, with the webs, with all the data. Go ahead and check it out, profootballfocus.com/draftpass17, and we will talk to you guys next week. Have a good one.